it to the other side of the ball. We'll go defense. And my guess is these grades are going to be a little bit higher. But let's start with the secondary, okay? How did you feel like the secondary played? We know what the receivers that Seattle has. We know that a lot of people were worried about what the secondary would look like. Now that we saw the game, Rob, how did you feel that the secondary did?
Yeah, Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf, and then a secondary that's been decimated to this point with injuries. It had all the makings for a terrible outing for the San Francisco 49ers defense. It should have been clear advantage Seattle when it came to throwing the ball. And surprisingly, that was not the case. The defense very much held its own throughout this game, absolutely did what was asked of them in this effort. And I've got to say that coming into it, as decimated as this secondary group is, this was an impressive showing. I had to take into account what my expectations for this group were when I considered the grade. I think that I had to bring them down a little in my grading. I couldn't get too generous because they did have some key penalties, and penalties continue to be an issue for this group. We continue to, set ourselves up to be burned and then make the grab and then get the call. And, if that's like the Josh Norman play against Green Bay where you're saving a touchdown by a veteran grab, right? And then the defense holds, that's genius. That's next level. But when you're struggling to get off the field and to take the ball out of Russell Wilson's hand and you commit that penalty and extend that drive, have to be docked for that. You have to be docked for that. So I thought that the secondary played above what I expected them to, but are still making some head-scratching mistakes there. So I gave them a B, a solid B.
Yeah, and I think that that's a fair grade. I think E-Man is looking like much better than what we can ask for right now. Where would we be without him at this point? I think he played extremely well against DK Metcalf and really is the CB1 on this team by all stretch of the imaginations. I think Drake Kirkpatrick, he obviously had the hold that you were talking about.
He
that
did.
Led to that drive continuing to go, which was a big momentum shift. Maybe could have changed the dynamic of that game. But I think with more and more time, he's going to turn into somebody that's going to be a valuable asset to the 49ers this season as well. I think he's showing signs that he could be a solid cornerback too for us as well. I think they're a B as well. I mean, I think the safeties did their job. I mean, they were kind of non-existent. We didn't hear too much about them, which sometimes is a good thing, but they didn't have any of those massive tackles that we usually see from them as well, but they didn't blow any plays either, which is a good thing, especially with a guy like Tyler Lockett, who is known for, making safeties and making cornerbacks look really, really bad.
Yes, so most definitely.
Yeah. So I think a solid B is fair. Look, we expected them to be routed. We saw the week before what Devontae Adams did to this secondary and the type of numbers he put up. Neither of these receivers had those type of numbers. So to me, you got to pass these guys and you got to give them a solid B because, these are just as good of receivers that didn't get the numbers that people expected. A lot of fantasy owners were pretty upset because they expected big games from these receivers and they didn't get it. So kudos.
And some fantasy owners that probably should have started the 49ers defense did not and got cute and started someone who had a good matchup and instead got destroyed this week.
All right, let's move it on to the linebackers. What'd you think about the linebackers? I mean, kind of silent. I don't know if we said their names too many times during the broadcast.
No, but when you look at the defensive performance, didn't have to call their names many times except for the Al-Shaair coverage on DK Metcalf, which was atrocious. But I don't blame the defense for that. I blame D'Amico Ryans for a play call that set up one-on-one coverage with Al-Shaair on DK Metcalf. That's just not what you want.
Yeah.
Anytime you're on the field, in particular in the red zone. So that was an egregious error, but not on Al-Shaair. Once Al-Shaair was set up opposite DK Metcalf, that was just a loss. That was just an acceptable, sorry, this is going to get thrown to DK. DK is probably going to make the catch, and that's not Al-Shaair's fault there. It was a schematic issue is my take on that. And then a decent game otherwise. I thought that they helped to contain the run. I thought that
that's the biggest point, I think. The biggest point of emphasis was they were getting into those gaps and stopping the run. The run wasn't an issue for us this game, which had been an issue in the past 3 games. And the 49ers,
Chris Carson, 13 carries for 30 yards, hemmed him up like nobody's business.
Yeah, and they had to go to their backup running back who did have a lot of success, but he was more on the outsides. It wasn't that inside kind of running game that had been eating us up. And I think the linebackers put it on their shoulders to be like, we're not getting beat down the middle in the running game this week.
Yeah, and agreed. It was 10 for 44 on Collins, the backup. And you have to imagine that part of that is just that, toward the end of the game, it played out in such a way where San Francisco's defense was not continually tested in that regard. I think that if it had been a closer game and Seattle had stuck with the run, potentially they would have found more success. But anyway, a solid outing by the linebackers. I gave them a B+ in this grade.
Yeah, I'm going to give them a B because I think in coverage they left some to be asked for, I guess. But I think they did a great job as far as stopping the run. To me, that was the biggest thing that I wanted to see. Chris Carson has been having a very quietly good season, averaging about 70 yards and a touchdown each game. Holding them to 30 yards, no touchdowns, I think, is a win for the linebacking core. So solid B to them. Good performance, I would say.
Absolutely.
The defensive line. Oh my goodness. And this defensive line in that first half was the defensive line that I want to see all the time. But Rob, tell me what you thought.
Hooah! That was fantastic. I mean, I'm just going to throw it out there to begin with. This was an A grade. I had to give them an A- just because we didn't win and they couldn't force turnovers, but a dominant performance nonetheless. 4 sacks contained Wilson, four runs for 26 yards, which for Wilson against this 49ers defense, not terrible, right? Not great, because the one end around, he probably would have gone on for a 95-yard touchdown run, but they just happened to be at the 15 or wherever they were. And so it only ended up being 15 yards. But there were a couple instances like that where Armstead and others failed to set the edge, and Wilson does what he does so well and escapes the pocket like nobody's business. He just sees that. He sees when you are too far inside. Eric Armstead has a bad tendency against Seattle to allow that to happen. Over the years, I just can't count the number of times I have seen him escape because of that. And that's not a complete knock on Armstead. Russell Wilson is a wildly talented guy with his feet and can escape the pocket in many instances.
He does that to every team.
Exactly, right? So you only hope to contain. You can't completely shut him down. So 4 rushes for 26 yards. The touchdown stings a little bit. They did sack him 3 times, which is fantastic. Great to see D Ford and Nick Bosa eating on a regular basis. Let's keep these boys fed going forward, because I'm with you. This is what I expected to see out of the gate, and this is what I hope to see going forward, because I'm lowering my expectations. That's for damn sure after what's happened so far in this year. But I still have my hopes. My expectations are crushed. My hopes and dreams are still alive, Sunil. So I'm going with my hopes on this one, that this is what we see going forward. Again, solid A performance. I'm docking them a little minus there, so an A- because of the idea that they didn't completely hem in Wilson in rushing, and that they couldn't force any strip sacks, because we were all over him, and you would hope that you'd be able to get the ball out at some point, and that ended up being one of the differences of the game, was the turnover differential. So that was the only disappointment there. Other than that, solid effort.
This was the best performance that I had seen from them. And remember, I had the rant last week where I'm like, you either dominate, it's like pass or fail, right? So for me, this is a passing grade. because I think they played well enough in the first half that this shouldn't have been a close game at all. But they had a bad partner on the other side in their offense that just couldn't take advantage of all the work they put in. I mean, there was a point, where they went 3 and out for the first 5 drives.
Yeah, I think it was 5 3 and outs in the first half.
So to do that against this high-powered offense, that could have been, even if you score 3 of those, a 21-0, even if it's a 17-0 deficit, changes the whole dynamic of the game, and the defense kept giving the 49ers offense a chance to do it. So for me, they're definitely passing. Now, the second half, there were a couple of things, Rob, that had to knock the grade down, and I gave them a B+. And the biggest one, you mentioned some, but the biggest one was the D Ford offsides. That made it from 3rd and 6 to 3rd and 1.
So frustrating.
Once again, that was a drive kill because they were gonna get Seattle off the field, and they let them back in, and once again momentum shift. So for me, that was a very, very big play. Unfortunately, that same drive is when Dre ended up giving them a hold, so we bailed them out again. And for that reason, they got a B+ because of that offside, because I think it was a very big momentum changer, Rob. And to me, that was one of the places where we let go of the rope, and at that point, the game was over.
Yeah, that was frustrating in real time. I was like, D Ford's offsides. D Ford's offsides. I saw it. I saw him lined up there. It was clear as day. And then when the flag came, I couldn't dispute it because I had seen it. I knew that he was lined up in the neutral zone. And you would like to see, maybe it's just me, but back similar to what you raised about Debo and wanting to see the frustration. I actually felt that way about D Ford in the post-game press conference. I didn't like the nonchalant answer he gave to, hey, did it sting to be offsides? Because this is a repeat offender, right? This isn't his first rodeo when it comes to this particular penalty, right? And they've come in critical moments. I mean, really critical moments in his career. And it just felt like he shrugged this one off a little bit too much. And I get not wanting to dwell on it. I'm not expecting him to be super contrite and shedding tears or anything strange like that. I just want a little more irritation at himself there, at an acknowledgement that, yeah, that's not going to happen. Like, I'm going to work at that. And it just sort of seemed more like a shrug. Like, I don't even know if I really was offsides for that one. I didn't get to see it, but like, yeah, it happens. And it's like, dude, no, it doesn't just happen. That's like you not paying attention to where you are on the field.
Right. And it can't happen at that down and distance right there at that time.
It can't happen at all, quite frankly. It's one thing to be offsides from jumping offsides. It's another thing entirely to line up offsides.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.